Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Law and Candor. I am Bill and I am here with Paige. We're thrilled today to have our colleague Reem Saffouri. She's the Vice President of Client Solutions and Success here at Lighthouse. She's going to be helping us discuss a topic that comes up a lot recently, and that's the major impact on creating more inclusive and equitable workplace environment. We'll hear about her journey, which is pretty unique, and how she got into the space and what we can learn from it and take any individual steps to improve our diversity, equity, and inclusion at whatever company you work for. Before we get to our conversation with Reem, we have to dive into our favorite portion of the program, and that is
Sightings of Radical Brilliance.
And as always, Sightings of Radical Brilliance is the portion of the program where we dive into the latest of news and noteworthy innovation. Today, we have an article in Forbes magazine by Robert Beasley, and he talks about how your company already owns the most powerful source of big data. Paige, let's talk about this one.
Yeah, so this article is really interesting. It continues on that theme of data as a resource, data as an asset for a company. So, in the article, Mr. Beasley talks about the greatest source of information being your customer's own words, not just the words, but combining words with artificial intelligence and linguistics and the insights it provides to a company. So again, just our company data really informing the business continues to be a theme here. I don't know, Bill, I continue to think that on the horizon, we have chief data officer positions where it's not just someone that's dealing with the security of data or the management of data as it relates to complying with regulations and such, but really using data as an asset for companies. I think that's the future of data management.
Yeah, I agree. And this article talks about what your customers think about you as being a vital source of information to run your business. And you think about what how this used to play out in the past. You would hire consultants to do outside polls and, conduct research on what your image was to the general market in the industry. You have all that data. It all exists out there, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's in the feedback, whether it's in the comments on your website, and understanding what your clients and customers think about you is always valuable insight to a CEO trying to run his business. And this article sort of touches on that. And it says it all in the title, right? Your company already owns the most powerful source of big data. And that's what your clients think about you, what your customers think about you. And this talks about how artificial intelligence can help that, to help position that and drive that within your company as you position your place in the market, whatever industry you're in. So it's an interesting article that Robert wrote in Forbes, and I would urge you to check it out. For now, though, we're going to get to our conversation with Reem. I really think you'll enjoy this. Reem is great. She's one of my favorite people here at Lighthouse. We love her to death. She does a great job on this. Enjoy. Hi, Reem. Welcome to the podcast. We've been asking probably the same question for the last 3 to 4 years, and that is, how did you get yourself into the e-discovery space? Because it's always a strange, circuitous story that does not go from A to B. But we're going to change it up today because of the subject matter of the pod, and we're going to ask you, because we're focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ask you, what does that actually mean to you, and how do you see companies properly incorporating that into their model?
Yes. Hi, Bill. Hi, Paige. Honor to be here talking about this really, really important topic. So what does equity and inclusion mean to me? It actually means that we will one day get to a time and a place where those of us who have been discriminated against or who are part of a group that has been overlooked in history inherently feel and have confidence and trust that we are being treated fairly, that we are being paid equally, and that we are given the same opportunities as those around us who have not been part of these overlooked groups. And to me, this includes being in leadership, being part of strategic decisions and strategic discussions, and representing for those around us so that others from our groups see people who look like them in positions that they are aspiring to be a part of.
I love it, Reem. I love hearing your passion around this. It comes through in your voice. And, I can tell that you've had personal experience here that's really helped shape your perspective and your commitment. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. Let's start with the personal, because it actually influences the professional experience that I have had. So I am the daughter of a Palestinian refugee. My father was born in Palestine and immigrated to Lebanon, and a Lebanese mother who also then became a refugee as part of the war in Lebanon. So we moved around a lot as children. My brothers and I, both of us, learned over time to assimilate to the environment that we're in, to the country that we're in. We learned to pick up accents, pick up mannerisms. As an example, we lived in Iraq for 3 years, and one of my uncles used to joke that Reem spoke Iraqi when I spoke Arabic, because I learned to just assimilate and become part of the community that I was in. So we learned how to code switch. And that actually impacted how we entered and how I specifically entered the professional world, where I shed my accent when I came to the United States as a student, a high school student, so that I would fit in. And yet there were still things about me that were different. Over time, I learned to become a little more American so that I would fit in. And that has really shaped who I am as a professional and the journey that I've had.
Just hearing you talk about that, it's super impactful, and it's seemingly simple act to just tell your story. Although I would imagine it would take some level of courage, right, depending on what the backstory is. But why do you think that more people don't share their personal experiences, and why is it important that they do it for the purposes of diversity and equity and inclusion?
Sure. That's a really, really good question, Bill. And I only recently started to share my story and share it so candidly and with just raw candor, frankly. And part of it is the fear of backlash. Part of it is, fear of being embarrassed, maybe being judged by those around us, or maybe when someone knows who we are and share kind of our true selves, that it becomes a condition of the decisions. It starts to impact the decisions that people around us make about our careers and about our professional trajectory, or the investment that they might be willing to make in us, because then they might be viewed in a way that is, that they're supporting someone that might be controversial. And I'll give you a personal example of that. For a very long time, I did not share that I was Palestinian. People would ask me where I'm from, and I would say I was from Lebanon, because Lebanon was a little bit safer than saying I'm Palestinian. This was in the early, late 1990s, early 2000s, when Palestinians were vilified for who we were. And we were viewed as being Palestinian was viewed as almost like a political statement. Even today, it's still a little bit uncomfortable because there might be a stigma attached to it. And therefore, my worry was that stigma might actually impact the investment that leadership might make in me as a professional, because I might be viewed as controversial as an individual, as who I am.
Hearing about these challenges with diversity, equity, and inclusion can be intimidating. And, as you're talking about it, it's somewhat depressing or demoralizing. So along with sharing personal experiences, what can individuals actually do to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organizations and throughout their industries?
Sure. One of the ways we talk about in the industry, and you hear people talk about, others being allies, we should define what that means. What does an ally look like? Because allyship can be really big. You could be part of joining a group that are really doing a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you might lead a committee and really have a broad impact within your organization, within your community. But it can also be something really small, right? So if you're a hiring manager, for example, make an intentional decision to give someone an opportunity who is from an overlooked demographic, right? And come in and look at your pay structure within your organization and make sure that we are promoting fairly, that we are paying equitably. And promotions might also mean investing in someone who may not have all the skills yet because they haven't had the same opportunities as someone who is from a community that has privilege. So looking at how do we invest in the talent that we have? How do we build it up so that we can build the diversity from the bottom up, not just look at the statistics and make ourselves feel good about those statistics. So as managers, we can have a huge impact on that. As individuals, other than joining a group or participating in DE&I activities, we can educate ourselves, right? And each of us in our own way, it can be an ally to someone else, right? So I, for example, as an Arab woman, can be an ally to a Black woman, to a white woman, to a Black man, right? And so really thinking about what we can do for each other, even when we are part of an overlooked community. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, not here at Lighthouse, obviously, I've only been here 2 years, I was discriminated against as a woman, and I did not really realize it in the moment. And I was my career was held back in a sense because the manager I had was equalizing me with men who were more junior to me, who had less responsibility than I had in terms of role and in terms of pay. And I allowed it to happen in a sense. I did not know how to speak up for myself. I was comfortable in my role at the company. And I look back now, and I feel like my career was held back. And so for me, making sure that this doesn't happen to other women coming behind me is something that I personally can do, and therefore speaking out about something so uncomfortable and almost embarrassing right now in the role that I'm in, looking back, realizing that I should have spoken up. And when finally I did and confided in a female leader at our organization, she actually encouraged me to speak to my new manager at the time about it. And he started to make changes so that he could bring me back to where I should have been in terms of pay. And that took time. And I don't want that to happen to others.
So Reem, that's interesting. And I'll say that, being raised by a single mother and her 3 sisters who were always either divorced or separated, and having a sister of my own, I was literally raised in a house of all women. And I watched how this played out in real time. And my sister, who saw it happen to my mother and saw it happen to my aunts, it took a similar approach to you. And as again, in the beginning, I don't think she realized she was being discriminated against. And it took my mother saying, don't make the same mistakes I made, kind of thing. And then she spoke up. And now, it's evolved into where she feels a responsibility. You touched on it a bit. Can you talk about how you feel a responsibility now that you've found the inner strength to feel empowered to stand up for yourself? Do you feel a responsibility now to be an example and even a confidant to women in the industry or minorities in the industry to come to? And how do you let them know that you're there for them? But other than by acting as example, are you proactive in telling your story to them, or do you reach out to them within your organization or within your community to say, I've been through this? How do you do it now that you've sort of gotten the confidence to empower yourself? How do you go forward and make sure you pass it on?
Yes, absolutely. I'm still learning, to be candid, how to make myself available to others. Over the course of the last few years, I have, especially in companies that I am a part of, joined the mentorship programs, identified women who were coming up in their careers to whom I felt I could connect, be a mentor, and with whom I could connect with, and almost organically started a mentoring program of my own. Speaking at podcasts like this is really important. So anyone from an overlooked community who would like to talk to me more can certainly feel free to reach out. I am on LinkedIn. I spoke at EDI, for example. So really speaking at conferences and doing the uncomfortable work of sharing my story. And I share tidbits at each conference so that the story doesn't become redundant and monotonous, yet finding the opportunities to do that and responding to people who do reach out. So, and I've also joined the EDI mentorship program, which is getting rolled out. I joined the mentorship program here at Lighthouse, and I've continued to stay in touch with my mentee over even after that program was essentially, the 1 year ended. So trying to find the opportunities organically, as well as putting myself out there, obviously, as I'm doing here today.
So Reem, I'm really interested. It sounds like you've got a great balance of being involved in formal programs and then also just kind of your own grassroots efforts, right? You're investing in people. Do you feel like individuals have their own responsibility to reach out, or would they be more successful in seeking out mentees or mentors rather to help them as, an overlooked group or overlooked individual? Do they have responsibility in this too, or is it just something that individual organizations have responsibility to balance out? How is it best working?
Sure. It goes both ways. So I think this getting to equity, which requires us to be inclusive, and then also and then requires us to also have a diverse organization. There is onus on a company, on an organization, similar to what Lighthouse is doing, to put a strategic focus on it, to make sure that our business structures, our business strategies, our business activities invite uncomfortable conversations, raw conversations, and challenge us to put in place policies, procedures, activities that will create not just diversity, yet room for inclusion for those diverse voices. Yet we as individuals who come from those what we call diverse groups have a responsibility to also participate actively, respectfully, and find a way for us to voice our opinions and then offer up, how we would want to participate. So it is incumbent on me, for example, and this is my opinion personally, to make it known to leadership here at Lighthouse how I want to show up at Lighthouse, what my career, aspirations are at Lighthouse, because they're not mind readers. And then the expectation I have of them is that they will support me in that, and they will invest in training and professional development, in coaching, and make room at the table. Pull up a chair if there isn't another chair left at the table, right? So that I can have that career progress, and so that others can see me progress in that way and know that these opportunities are available to them too.
What's funny is I've actually seen some of the, discrimination play out. And to me, it's been more subtle and I think sometimes subconscious. I think that I've not run into many Archie Bunker types in our industry that are just overtly bigoted, but I have run into people that are subconsciously bigoted. They don't necessarily see it, but when you see the trend of how they treat certain people and how they treat others, whether it's men and women or minorities and not, you start to see a pattern. When you pick up something, I'm sure you're more sensitive to it than even I am, but I've seen it. I've witnessed it from, as a third party looking and watching. When you see that, how do you deal with that? Right. Cause that's not what they might not be conscious that they're being discriminatory. They might not be conscious of their own bigotry. So it makes it a little bit, is it just sort of standing up for yourself and almost regardless of where you see it and how it comes from? Or is there something, do you handle it more subtly if it's not as overt? It's curious to me because I think, again, having witnessed it, you can't call someone out for being bigoted if they don't really know they are, because then they get defensive. But at the same time, you're noticing a trend that maybe they're blind to.
Yes. And this is also one of the things that is difficult and that I am educating myself on, is how to speak up in a way that will be well received and appreciated by the person whom, you're right, Bill, oftentimes I don't think people realize or recognize that they are being biased. In fact, the story I told earlier in the podcast around the manager who was discriminating against me as a woman, I don't think he really realized it. I think if I were to ask him and challenge him on it, he would have stood up and said, no, I wasn't doing that. Yet we also noticed he treated women differently than he treated men, right? And at the time, I didn't say anything. Other women did and went to leadership and shared some of their observations. So there are different ways to do it, and I think it depends on the situation. There are times here at Lighthouse where I have called out in a meeting, especially when we're preparing for a client meeting, whether we are being completely inclusive, right? And whether we're making sure that everyone in the meeting has a purpose and has value. Have I been perfect at it? No. Yet people here at Lighthouse, I find, give us all some grace and allow us to be a little bit, this is going to be a bumpy road. So allow the road to be bumpy, allow us to be imperfect so that we can all get better together. So part of it is the organization has to make space for those conversations, right? And for people to stumble and for us to talk through it. Other times it might be more of a private conversation where we might call up the person and ask if they're open to hearing our perspective and how we received some of the behavior, some of the words, how they landed on us, and really sharing that rather than accusing them of something or calling them out. It's really important to help them understand how their words and actions make us feel.
Reem, thanks for joining us today. This was a great, it's a departure from what we usually cover here, right? We usually, talk about the confluence of technology and legal. And I think now this is just as important a conversation because it's something that affects almost every industry. I would say every industry, right? And I think we loved your perspective, and you do have a unique perspective on it. I'll say that I think, in terms of a takeaway here, I think it's, to once you find the courage to empower yourself and stand up for yourself, then I think it's also incumbent upon any person, but certainly any minority or any woman to then be an example and then be a confidant for those that come after them. Because I think that's where we ultimately will get to a place, both within the organization and within our communities, where everybody's treated equally. And I think it's important. And I frankly, the more I work with a company like Lighthouse that embraces this, the more you see how important it is. Because when, look, I'm not going to knock all white males because I'm one of them. But when you see a diverse opinion affect the direction of a company, you could see how much better the company does and how much better the company is received by our clients and within the industry. So great talk. Great having you. Love you to death. Thanks for joining us today on Law Candor, and thanks for bringing your perspective. It was great.
Thanks, Reem.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, folks, if you like our show, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe. We like all that activity. Rate us wherever you get your podcast. Tell your parents about us. Tell your friends about us. Tell everybody that you know about us. Tell them that we have a new co-host and that she makes fun of me less than our old co-host. That'll drive more traffic or not.
We're just getting started.
Yeah. So anyway, check us out and please do rate us and subscribe whenever you can. Thank you.